Men nu är klockan 1 minut över, så jag tror att vi kör igång, va?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's get started.
Hi and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Malin Bodolla and I'm responsible for marketing at Litium. So this webinar is one in a series that we're doing to inspire and give tips and tricks to companies about digital commerce. And with me today, I have Håkan Nylander, responsible for strategy at Litium, and we're going to talk about trends within digital commerce in B2B. But first, just some practicalities. We will do a presentation for approximately 20 minutes, so there is a lot of time for questions. And you can take them as we go, or there is time in the end. And if you want to ask any questions, you do it in the panel for the webinar, probably to your right, and it says questions. So just type your question there and enter, and I will keep track of the questions during the session. And also after the webinar, we will share the recording. So if you miss something or you want to share it with someone else, you can easily do that afterwards. So with that, let's get going. So just a short introduction of who I am. As I said, I'm responsible for marketing at Litium, and I have a background from B2B, my whole work life, sort of, and a background from companies like Adobe, LinkedIn, a couple of years at Klarna, and before joining Litium, I worked at Pedab, a Swedish distributor operating in 9 countries. So what about you, Håkan? Who are you?
Thank you. Well, as Malin mentioned, I'm heading up the strategy team here at Litium. I spend a lot of my time looking into how we can develop our business in the years to come. And one area I especially enjoy investigating, that is actually how larger trends are impacting both us, but also our customers. To give a little bit more of my background, I spent most of my career in the tech space for B2B. I spent several years working at Accenture as a management consultant, but then I also headed over to Asia and spent 12 years there working with business development, strategy, and operations.
Quite different, I can imagine.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Quite different.
Yes. Okay, so 2020 was the year where I would say everything changed. I think we all can agree to that. So just a short recap, what has been the results from COVID-19, specifically for B2B companies in Scandinavia?
Yeah, I think that what we've seen is that there has really been a mixed bag among B2B companies. I mean, we've seen some companies that didn't have any major impact. Some have actually done quite well, but a lot of them have been impacted, and especially the ones that has been supplying to the industry that has been most severely affected. And I'm thinking about tourism, I'm thinking about like hotels, restaurants, all those kind of businesses supplying to them. They were quite heavily impacted. But we're also seeing for a lot of industries that work with complicated supply chains, they have had quite difficult time during some periods where they couldn't get their materials or their components, so they had to shut down production for a while and then kind of find new suppliers and restart and so on. So I mean, there has been a mixed bag, I would say. And if you listen to the stock market and what some of the larger Swedish B2B companies are saying, they still say we're still not out of it. They're still feeling the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic.
But let's look forward. So looking into 2021, I think that, Håkan, you have not made, I mean, you read a lot, you look a lot, everything at the trends, but this is not a summary of all the different trend reports that is out there. But you've actually seen 3 trends in Scandinavia that you think we haven't been talked about that much, but also that you see will start happening in Scandinavia during 2021. So what is the first trend?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I try to understand more of the underlying factors, and I look into a lot of new technology. I mean, that's essentially what we do as a company, so I look into a lot, but I'm more interested in understanding how technology is changing the way businesses are doing business, essentially, and how it's changing our behavior. And the first trend I will start to talk about is that I think more of us will start to use B2B influencers. And I know that a lot of you have seen that there are many professionals on LinkedIn. They are promoting their brand, they're promoting themselves and so on. That's nothing new. That's been going on for many, many years. But what I think will grow in 2021 is that we have a lot of professionals that have created a large following, that have a strong credibility, that they share a lot of insights. And for them, it's quite easy to start working with B2B brands that they are affiliated with and promote them, I think, in a much more refined way than it has been done historically. And to take one example, I'm actually quite fascinated in coffee and espresso. I like to,
we know that.
You know that. And I like to know, how do you make the perfect espresso? And I follow this gentleman called James Hoffman on YouTube. And I mean, he's created a very strong following, and actually in quite short time as well. So he has over 700 followers. He writes everything about, you know, like grinders, like espresso machine, everything for the perfect espresso. And he actually targets mostly consumers, I should say. But the interesting thing, what he does is he also uses his platform to promote products that are used by professional baristas and coffee chain owners. And he actually has a collaboration with one of the larger Italian espresso manufacturers. And he declares this open. That is not a problem really, because he has already created his credibility because he buys all the machines that he tests. So it's not controversial in a way. So he already has this credibility. And a lot of you might not know, but a professional espresso machine, that's actually a major investment for a cafe or a restaurant. So that he can, you know, use his expertise in how to make the perfect espresso. He has a really good understanding of how coffee chains make money. He's been in the industry for quite some time. So he's actually in the perfect position to influence professional buyers that are looking into buying a new espresso machine. And you might think that, okay, this is, you know, very related to B2C and so on. But I think that this is a great example because I think here is what we really need to understand, that there is a lot of consultants and advisors that have deep knowledge in a lot of different areas. They have used LinkedIn, for instance, to build a loyal following, and they're providing a lot of insights. And I think that they really have this credibility, and I think that is essential for B2B. And for them to take the next step to start talking about different products and solutions, that's not that far off. I think it's going to be a very natural trend. So I think this content that they are going to produce, that is what is so important, because when you're looking for a new product or new service, and now we're talking about something new you need to get, I mean, you need to get an understanding for what kind of products is this? What can I expect? How can I, you know, what should I be looking for? And this search phase is so important in B2B, and you need somehow to narrow down your search, and you need to speed up the process, because we all know we don't have the time. I mean, we can't spend that much time today because we have so many tasks that we need to do. So I think this kind of content will help a lot in driving actually the promotion for B2B products.
But do you see this is only for like simple products, or can it also be for more complex with long sales cycle, etc.?
Exactly, that's actually the most common thing. When I mention this to people, they go, that's only for simple products. But I think actually it is not only for simple products, because I think for complex products, the need is actually larger, because you have actually a larger information collection period. So I think it is so crucial that you find the right kind of content. And I think this is actually going to transform how we work with B2B marketing.
Interesting. And also for those of you that don't know like how big the influencer marketing business is. So for example, Scandinavian Internet, according to them, about 18% of everything that we buy online is on a recommendation from an influencer. And especially, I mean, of course, in specific segments like the younger audience, it can be up to 55% of everything that they buy is on a recommendation from an influencer. So it is quite strong. And I think it will be interesting to see if it goes over to B2B as well.
We will see.
Yeah. So what is the next trend that you see?
Yeah. The second trend I see is that more companies start to question the use of the traditional reseller model. And, you know, brands have for a long time been frustrated with not being able to control the customer experience. They're being disconnected from the customer. But most importantly, they have not been able to gather the data of the customer. Now that's really, you know, what is vital in the digital age. You need to be able to collect the data to understand how you can develop your products in a better way, and actually how you can deliver a better experience. And I think there was a very important piece of news. I don't know if everyone heard it, but Volvo Cars, end of last year, I think it was in November, that they mentioned that terminating the reseller agreement with Bilia. And I think that was a very telling sign on what's to come. And Volvo said that they expect 50% of all new car sales is done through online medias. And that is a staggering amount that they're moving online. And I think that it has a really interesting story, because I think the technologies that we do have today, they provide a really good customer experience online. And you can also work with much more complex products, and you can create a really good experience buying complex products online. And I think every one of you who has followed Tesla and so on, you know that they really showed the way on how you can sell online, and they really broke the reseller dominance. And I think it's a really interesting happening, and I think you're going to see more industries where this is going to happen. And as a first step in this is a big change, of course, in changing your sales channels model. But I think where you're going to see this more clearly, and where I think a lot of you guys listening and what you're going to use much more, is that I think, for instance, manufacturers expanding into new geographies, instead of setting up a new resale, which is actually a quite time-consuming and resource-demanding work, you will instead turn to marketplaces, because marketplaces is actually a very excellent way of actually testing a new market to start with. But secondly, you can also test your product range, and you can see, okay, which product actually get traction here, which products don't get traction. So it's a very efficient way of actually testing out, and not only do a few markets per year, which is typical for a manufacturer when you're growing your international platform. You can actually go into a lot of different markets because it's easier. And of course, obviously, it depends on the product and the aftermarket support and so you need. But I think that this actually opens up more opportunities for these kind of companies.
And you're speaking of like opportunities, but yes. I guess it's also a threat. Or how should you look at this?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a reseller, of course, this can be a threat. But I think it's also a matter of that you actually need to invest much more in digital solutions, because I mean, the war is there. There is where you need to win, and there's where you need to win your customer. And I think it's so important to understand this, that if you're not where your customer is, you're not going to get the business. And that is what everyone needs to understand. And I feel I've been working with the B2B space for a very, very long time. And I think sometimes that B2B companies has, they've had such a strong customer relationship, but they have also owned the relationship in the sense that they can decide where the customer buys. And that is not really the case anymore now when you have so many opportunities online.
Good. Just checking if there is any questions. So don't forget to put your questions under the question section in case there's something that you might disagree or whatever. So great. So what about the third trend that you see?
And I think this is actually one of the larger trends. And I think this is, maybe I'm a little bit early with this one, but I also like to see a little bit into the future. And I think actually the third trend is the rise of B2B marketplaces in the Nordics. And I mentioned marketplaces before, and some of you might wonder what is a B2B marketplace. I think we all know what Amazon is, right? But they also have something called Amazon Business, and they essentially offer companies, large ones, small one, everything, from Fortune 500 down to small entities, organization, hospitals, and they provide all kinds of products, anything from like components to, office supplies. They have everything. And in the US, they've actually been able to offer a larger assortment to lower prices than some of the best well-known US distributors. And they're growing fast. This is not a slow-moving part of the Amazon business. This is the piece of the business we don't talk much about. But I read a report from RBC Capital that estimated in 2019, Amazon had sales of $10 billion within this space. So obviously, this is a massive chunk of business. But this is not only a US phenomenon. It's also very much something happening in Europe. And we have more than 300 B2B marketplaces in Europe. And these marketplaces, they actually attracting serious capital. One report I read said that B2B marketplaces has raised more than 5 billion euros so far. And also, I think we should expect a very rapid development, because one thing that separates B2B marketplaces from traditional wholesalers and distributors is that traditional distributors, wholesalers are often local. It's a local business, but B2B marketplaces are not. They often think about expanding geographically, because they set up the model for selling online, and then they try to expand that into new geographies. So I think this is a very interesting development. And to give one example, there is a French marketplace called Anchor Store. They are present in 8 countries. They recently raised 25 million euros. So this is really attracting serious capital and serious concern, I think, for traditional wholesalers and marketplaces. And in Scandinavia, if we talk about that, I have not seen yet this big shift towards these kinds of investments. We do have these kind of companies acting this way, but I haven't seen it yet. But I'm sure that we will have these kind of investments with new companies starting up with a much more digital first strategy, so to say.
But I mean, if you look global and in Europe and etc., why do you think so many invest in B2B marketplaces then?
Yeah. First of all, every time we talk about B2C versus B2B, we always say, you know, B2B is so much bigger. We have a massive market out there. I mean, you can always debate how many times larger B2B is versus B2C, but we know there is a massive market, and we know it's much larger than B2C. But I also think there are some other things that make this really interesting. And fundamentally, there are some very strong reasons for underlying how companies do business. And first of all, I think that actually, like, B2B marketplaces offers a lot of convenience. I mean, some of them have, you know, really good digital experience. It's exactly what you experience as you are when you're buying something as a consumer. They also have usually a very extensive assortment. You can find everything you need. But then they have something that I found that not every traditional wholesaler and distributor work with. That is, that they have transparency. They have a transparency around the prices and what you can get and so on. I think this is also where they separate a little bit, that they don't have this business when they don't show everything, but it's much more open. So that really changed how you do business. And I think this will change the dynamics in many industries, because a lot of traditional distributor wholesalers, they have not been challenged in decades. They have a very, if I put it like, protected business, because there has been actually quite a lot of barriers to enter the industry. But now, you know, those barriers are taken away with these investments. And a lot of these traditional distributor wholesalers, they are often also underinvested in digital capabilities. So of course, here is where there is if I put it here, you can see a rapid change with these new companies. And I think we should expect a rapid change in this part of the industry.
We actually have a question here. I'm not sure if it's, but it says, to buy from a B2B marketplace, for example, Amazon, is it required to be a registered company, or can consumers buy as well if they're interested in buying higher volumes?
I am not an expert on Amazon, I should say.
But let's take that then, and we can get back to you afterwards. Yeah. Great. So, I mean, looking at marketplace, it's the same here. Is it a threat or an opportunity? I mean,
yeah, I think it depends on who you are.
Yeah.
Obviously, for manufacturers, it is a great opportunity. You get more sales channels you can use. You can expand into more geographies, and I think that is really where the big opportunity is. But I think that if you are a wholesaler or distributor, I think this, of course, is a large challenge, because you're going to face more competitors essentially. So I think that if you're not looking into how you develop your digital capabilities, I think you might have a few years to do that, but it's not much we're talking about here. And I think one seriously needs to reevaluate how you go to market and how you build digital capabilities.
Yeah. So that was the 3 trends. Just repeat.
Yeah, first of all, it is that we will start to use B2B influencers.
Yep.
I think that's the first one, a big one. Secondly, we will start to question the use of the traditional reseller model. And third, the rise of B2B marketplaces in the Nordics.
Yeah, So let's see, Håkan, when we stand here in a year from now, if that will actually have started to happen. So interesting also is like looking back a little bit. I mean, during 2020, there was a lot of ideas and trends that came up. So, and then 2020 left. So what do you see? What trends did actually happen, and which one will continue? And did anything pop or flop, or what happened?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have talked about it, but as I see it very clear, the digitalization trend that I talked about, that we talk about all the time, I mean, it is really strong. And I think it has been particularly strong due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that will continue. I see that is a very strong trend. It's actually accelerating due to this. But we also started to talk about the new normal, that we would, really leapfrog into the use of a lot of digital solutions and so on. And I think that it's going to be very interesting to see, especially what happens during autumn when the vaccine has been rolled out. And the question is, are we going to go back to the office working 5 days a week, or are we going to find a more flexible approach? And I think that very much will determine to what extent we will use the digital solution. I think they will be the backbone of everything we do, but it's a question to what extent we will actually use them. I think that is actually more the question, rather will we use it or will we not use it. I think it's rather the extent of the usage.
Good. So we have a couple of questions. One is going back to marketplaces, speaking about ROI to expand into marketplaces. Is there a huge effort, or should it be part of the normal business sort of?
I think that the use of marketplaces should be considered like, okay, that is one sales channel like any other. And you need to look into, okay, what kind of benefits could it give us as a company? There is a bunch of things written about marketplaces, the pros and cons with it. And I think you should look into those articles, because there is a lot of things you need to consider before using a marketplace, and if it fits into the model that your company is working with. But I think you also need to look into what I mentioned before. It's like, are you where your customer is? Are you where they want to buy your products? And I think that is actually a more relevant question now than it was in the past. So I think you need to weigh the different pros and cons of going into it. And I think there is also where you run into the questions about, okay, will this be a good return on investment or not?
Yeah, great. So we have a lot of CEOs listening here. What would you say would be the biggest challenge for them during 2021? And why?
I think CEOs probably have too many things to think about. I mean, and I probably shouldn't give them more headache. But joking aside, I'm here to talk about a lot of different things. And I think that every CEO, they need to have the big picture in mind. And I think one of the most important questions today is, how can new technology and business model change the industry I'm in? I think far too many companies, they rely on their past winnings. I mean, they do not put enough energy into understanding how the world is changing. And what I often see is that they underestimate how much technology drives change. And I think that if a company is not innovating and not finding new business model, someone else will. And as I mentioned before, with a massive amount of capital being injected into tech-driven businesses, no industry is going to be left untouched.
We have another question. It's about, will B2B take on AI personalization?
That's a very, very good question. I think that very much depends on the amount of customer you have. I think if you do not have so many customers, usually you get a better understanding of their needs and what they need to have and so on. But I think as you grow your business, and especially when thinking about distributor wholesalers, they often have a lot of different customers, and they have a lot of sometimes they have a lot of repeating business, but they also have a lot of customers that are not repeating business. And I think for them, if they want to work towards providing better products that cater to their needs, and also if they want to go more towards creating better loyalty, I think you can start to see that. But I'm not expecting to see a huge drive into personalization in the beginning. I think that there is a lot of things that needs to be done before you actually spend a lot of time with that.
Good. Another question going back to marketplaces.
Yeah.
Do you see a trend in vertical marketplaces in B2B?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is actually one thing we've seen a lot, that there is a new marketplaces focus on a particular niches as a verticals, and then build up a complete offering within that and very much cater for that. But instead of just going for one geography, they go global, they go international. So that is something you see, and that are not the marketplaces that you and I are going to hear about. It's going to be for the one in a particular industry. There is a lot of there is a lot of marketplaces going into particular niches for industrial components, for instance, going into materials, etc., that are working on that. But you also see it in services. Services is actually quite a big part of marketplaces.
Another question: should B2B companies focus even more on the security of the data as we are digitizing even more in that segment?
Absolutely. I think questions about data and security is something we probably haven't spent enough time as companies in general. I think that all the challenges we hear about companies that are having challenges with security, I think that problem is going to continue, and I think it's going to become worse. And I think for B2B, this is especially important as well.
And someone is writing, I know that some larger B2B companies are exploring this, where they offer customers their own product, but they're also opening up to other suppliers as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's if you look at the Amazon business model, I mean, they have a larger part of the sales now through third-party suppliers, and I think you're also going to see that within B2B, where you start working with drop shipment and similar solutions, where you expand your assortment, but you do it in a much more refined way. So I think that is going to grow as well.
Yeah, and a lot of questions about marketplaces. Yeah. So really nice that you send in your questions. Here's one question: do you think that new marketplaces for B2B will pop up, or is it more the B2C marketplaces that will expand and transform into?
I think we're going to see both. I think for B2C marketplaces, the logic to you continue. If you have a range of products that caters for the B2B segments, that makes a lot of sense to expand into that. But I also think that you're going to see B2B marketplaces that are brand new investments. In the same way we saw marketplaces being shaped 15, 10 years ago, you're going to see the same thing happening in B2B, because I feel that it's still moving a little bit slow, and this is where the opportunity is. If the incumbent players are moving slow, that means that people are going to see an opportunity here, and they're going to jump at that opportunity, and they're going to invest money and bet on that this is actually going to start making money. And I have to say, I'm a little bit surprised that we haven't seen more investment in B2B. We do see it in Europe, and that's, I think, the important thing that I said. It's so much capital being injected into this. So I would be surprised if we don't see more investment being done in Scandinavia in this area.
Good.
Malin.
Yes.
Let's turn the table.
Oh, okay.
Now let me ask you. We have a lot of marketing directors, CMOs, and marketing specialists listening. I wondered, do you have any specific advice for them for 2021?
One advice, we need a separate webinar for that, I think. No, but I think, I mean, there is a lot of asks on the marketing department these days. And I think the situation with COVID-19 has really forced marketing to do even more and faster to meet all these new online needs. But I think it's nothing new, but I really want to emphasize to really set up your inbound marketing strategy if you already haven't done so. And by that, I mean, like, one, map your customer journey if you haven't done it. Understand your customers, like where they are, what they need, what are they looking for. Two, really set your scope. Clear KPIs and make sure that you align that with the rest of the organization, that you all aligned about your marketing priorities, because I'm pretty sure you can't do it all because this is tough work right now. Three, I think you should challenge your organization structure. Does it fit these new needs? Maybe you should restructure your marketing organization so it really works for you, because sometimes we are stuck in an old model and it's not really working for these new things. Four, I mean, no rocket science, but focus on content, content, work on the right content for the full digital journey. I mean, be generous, really share tips and tricks, use video, make sure you have great product information, not only for your products to be found, but really to be better to evaluate if it's the right product for your company, and etc. And then also, I mean, maybe you can find good influencers in your area because they're also great at building this inspiring and engaging content. Or maybe you should be one yourself. I mean, there is a space for that, to take that going forward. And lastly, I think number 5, automate. Make sure that you have great technology in place. I mean, set up your marketing automation, get a PIM in place, a product information system, etc., and work really close with IT to make sure it's integrated. So it's nothing working in silos, etc. So I think that is like, it's a big thing, but I think it's important.
So what do you think are the biggest challenge for a CMO doing this?
No, but I think that really, like, the marketing organization and the role of marketing has changed so much. A couple of years ago, it was more about building brand, etc. Today, I think marketing is so central to building the whole sales cycle, like building demand, and it's so much more central. So I think all of you CEOs out there as well, support your marketing, give them what they need to be able to do this work, because it's so important going forward.
I think as well. I think actually the role has changed quite a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not working in marketing, but I do see how it really has transformed.
Yeah.
And how important the marketing function has become compared to in the past. I mean, it's a central part of driving customer growth.
Yeah, and we also see that we do every year a B2B report, and we ask about where does the ownership lie in the digital commerce, digitalizing your whole business, etc. And sometimes it's not really decided. It's a shared ownership, etc. But I would really encourage marketing to take that, drive it, and I mean, make that happen, because I think this is the future and it's a lot of fun. So let's see. Yeah, so let's see if we have more questions. I think there is one question here. How do you find B2B influencers, and how do you measure their performance? I think in general, it's harder to find B2B influencers since it's a new phenomenon. I mean, there is no like agencies, companies that you can just reach out to and get your, but it's more about like finding the people who know your business, to have the expertise, knowledge, expert area. So maybe it's an expert within your area, someone that people listen to and trust. Maybe they have their own site or blog or something. And maybe they don't have the same reach as a B2C influencer, but more engagement, for example. And I think if we go into how to measure, I mean, it really depends on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. If it's sales and conversion, or if it's more brand building, etc. I mean, it can be everything from traffic to sites, read articles. I think, well, in general, I think engagement is a good parameter to actually use. Yeah. Let's see if we have other questions. Wow, it's a lot of questions. Let's see, sorry.
Yeah. I had one question here regarding some more example of B2B marketplaces. And I think what I can mention more, I mentioned Amazon Business, I mentioned Anchor Store that I have in Europe. There's another one called Mano Mano that has also grown quite a lot. But I think actually now when you heard me say it, B2B marketplaces, start searching it. It's a lot out there. There's a lot of companies offering it. And I think also one important thing to consider is understand which marketplace is doing well in which market, because there is a great variety globally in how marketplaces perform and which one are the preferred ones. And I think also you need sometimes also to understand who is doing well in a particular industry. Is that industry using marketplaces or not? So I think there is a little bit of research one needs to do before deciding on which marketplace to do, because that's also the thing. I don't think you only try one and say yes, no to marketplaces. I think it's better if you try a couple and then see, okay, which one really plays out well for us.
Yeah. Good. We have another question here, and I think this will be the last question because we're short of time. But I think that, I mean, again, we will reach out to you who have actually asked questions because we can't do them all. So what's the view on collaboration between B2B, selling someone else's product, and on dropshipping engagement? Or is this more for B2C?
No, I think it's I've seen it already when I talk to some companies that they use drop shipment, and I think it comes down to a number of things. Obviously, your capability of actually supplying for that kind of logistics and fulfillment. I think that's obviously a question if you're used to doing that or not, and can you do it? But there are of course other ways that it can be fulfilled by a third party and so on. There is a lot of solutions there, but I think that is actually something that can grow in importance. And I think also understanding is like which model you choose and how much of output the distribution and everything you do. That's obviously an important question for you as a company. And I think going internationally, that becomes even a bigger question where you might not have your warehouse and so on. So I think there is a couple of questions you need to think about how you can do it. But there are, and that's the important thing, there are a lot of ways to solve this. It is not as complicated as it used to be.
Great. So then we're actually out of time, but again, we have a lot of content available on our site, and I think we have done a webinar series where you can find a lot of information. You will get an email tomorrow with a recording of this and also our contact details, and I'm pretty sure people can reach out to you, Håkan.
Yeah, especially, I mean, we very much encourage everyone, you know, connect with Malin and me on LinkedIn. Let's continue the discussion because I love sharing knowledge, and I also like to get a lot of insights from other people. I mean, I wouldn't get anywhere without having the insights of everyone like you listening here. So do connect, and let's continue the discussion there.
Yeah. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening, and also happy if you have ideas of other subjects that you think we should actually talk about and discuss in this webinar series. So reach out, ask your questions, and I'm sorry we didn't have time for all the questions. We will reach out to you afterwards and give you the answers on that. With that, I think if it's nothing else, we have like 20 seconds left or something.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care. Och det är du som stänger av.